You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch TV and movies about how sometimes demons are just a little silly.
Sometimes a demon...
They're just a little goofy.
It's just like a silly little guy.
Yeah. It's just a guy who's going to maybe pee in your bedroom, but, you know, just a weirdo named George.
Yeah. He had real demons from Buffy, but more specifically Angel. Angel was really good at having silly little guys.
Yeah, you texted me I think you said it was a cross between Buffy and House.
It's like Buffy meets X-Files meets House.
Yeah. I'm Jodie.
I'm Andrea.
And we watched the pilot of Evil.
Evil. Yeah.
Which is a CBS show, technically, I realized.
Yeah. So I just said the highest praise, which is like I just listed 3 of my favorite shows. We'll talk about this show and how much I liked it. But I wouldn't say it's like if you compounded all 3 of those shows, it's exponentially as good as the 3 of them put together.
No.
It's just the vibes, like the mood board for this show is Buffy, X-Files, House. I read a lot of people saying Law and Order, which I get because it's a procedural.
Yeah,
but it's way more House than it is Law and Order.
I could see that. Yeah, I remember when I mentioned this last week and I said, like, I've actually already watched 2 seasons and I'm, like, going to watch the 3rd. I kept saying, like, I don't quite understand why I'm watching this, you know? Because it's like, I liked Buffy when we did the pilot. I just, and the Halloween episode, I just never stuck with it. It wasn't something that, like, called to me. But I do, for the type of TV watching that I've been doing recently, stuck at home, I really enjoy the routine of a procedural.
This is candy. It
is candy.
Yeah, yes. I watched an episode with my housemate. I watched the pilot, and then they went, I would watch another one. And I was like, yeah, let's watch another one.
That's how I watched 3 full seasons.
Yeah. It's
I just
totally
kept
one of
leaving
those
it on.
shows. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a good time. I really felt the whole time I was watching it like I'm watching a TV show, but in a way that I like. Sometimes I like when a show feels like, I'm like, I could get into the swing of it. I knew what it was going to be for the most part. Like,
yeah, it's definitely, candy is the right word. It's like pretty people, like kind of familiar tropes, some surprising effects here and there where you're like, whoa, wait, what? Like, there's a lot of
Dutch angles, just like so many. Like
so
there are a few in the first one, but they really by episode 2, it is like
they're trying to do the hot priest thing, which they are doing.
Yeah,
I mean, he is attractive. Yeah, and he stays attractive,
super charming too. I don't know that I'm familiar with Mike Colter otherwise. I'm trying to think. I didn't watch Luke Cage, and I think that's his big show, right?
Yeah. I wasn't familiar with him either. His face looked familiar to me, but I couldn't place where I knew him from.
Yeah, but I like him a lot. Yeah. I'm looking now. Oh, he was in a bunch of episodes of The Good Wife, which makes sense.
Oh, that's where I know him from.
It's another
again
one of
a
those
procedural
shows
that felt like candy, where you just kind of keep going with it.
Well, and Michelle and Robert King, I have learned, are also the creators behind The Good Wife and The Good Fight. It's their show too.
That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, to be clear with our listeners, I've watched a ton of this show and done almost no research because I've been sick for 10 days.
Yeah.
Since our last recording.
I watched 2 episodes and did a fair amount. Enough.
Yeah.
Because I'm planning to watch this.
Yeah.
Through probably. I didn't do a ton of like, major, but I read some reviews of the pilot. I listened to an interview with Michelle and Robert that they did the week before they were going into the writer's room for Evil, which I thought was really interesting because it was interesting to hear them talk about the concepts they had for the show and the kind of like motivating questions without them really being able to get into the plot of it. So that was kind of fun. So we can talk about all of that.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear about that because, this was one of those things where I sat down to try it out for the podcast and then ended up just leaving it on the whole time. I was mistaken last week when I said that season 3 had quote unquote just come out. It had just gotten to Hulu on December 31st and they were making it sound like a premiere of season 3. Gotcha. That's not true. Season 4 is out. It's all available on Paramount Plus. Season 4 is the final season. So the season finale of season 4 is the series finale.
Oh, wow. I'm even more motivated now. I love a show that's done.
Yeah,
I love to watch a finished show.
Exactly. And I'm really grateful because I literally last night or the night before, it must have been, I don't know, whatever, time has no meaning, finished season 3 and was like, oh, they better not fucking end it here because there's no resolution to anything. Like they opened up a new can of worms. I think I mentioned to you in a text, and that's all I'll say is there's like a Rosemary's Baby vibe happening.
Very cool.
And I was like, this better not be the fucking end. And then I'm like, oh, there's a whole other season already available.
Perfect.
That I can just go watch tonight. So I don't even have to wait for the next season. It's already there.
Perfect. 50, a nice round 50 episodes, which feels perfect. Should every show be 50 episodes?
I mean, maybe. Because like they've had time to like develop various plots. I can't wait to hear your reaction as you continue to watch this, because there's so many times where I'd be watching it and I would just be like, what the absolute fuck?
Perfect.
Like, and not in a negative way, just in a like, wow, okay, we're going, all right, cool. Yeah. So the cast is, like you said, Mike Colter, Katja Herbers, and Aasif Mandvi, who I had mentioned, we know from like The Daily Show, and
great, by the way.
He's really good. Yeah, I know.
Like, I think everybody's doing a pretty good job. I think Kristen.
Yeah.
Some are doing better. I think she's doing fine. I think I really like her with the other two. Yes. But I think Ben and David are like, I think they're so fun to watch. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but
she continues to be pretty good at what she's doing. Like, totally good, great, whatever, not
likable,
mind-blowing, totally likable, and like a really good foil for the other two. Like, I think the three of them, their relationship is what's fun about it. Her mom comes into it more later on, as does obviously Michael Emerson is a huge part of it.
We'll get into the plot of this, and I want to talk about the mom when we get to her a little bit, but she is described in the original network script as a former Iron Maiden groupie, which like you could see how she's dressed in the pilot.
Wow.
She's like, so that's really
incredible.
Fun. She is in the pilot. So should we, do you want to,
let's talk about the pilot.
They're the main three. We can talk about the rest of the cast as they pop up maybe.
Yeah.
The only other one actually, well, obviously Michael Emerson, who we'll get to, but then
who is eating scenery throughout this whole series in like a voracious way, and it's so delightful.
Fun. That's a show like this, you can do it. You know what I mean? You can really, that's the other thing. This is the house of it for me too, is that like it's just enough removed from reality that like it is totally fine for your actors to be big and over the top and just having a good time.
And not to spoil anything, but it continues to remove itself further from reality and allow them to really just kind of
good. That is what I want.
Yeah.
The only other like real cast member I think worth mentioning is Kurt Fuller, who plays her psychiatrist, whose name is also Kurt. He's another one. It's another one of those shows where everyone has been around forever. I know him best from Wayne's World. He's Richard's like right-hand man. So he's been around forever.
I'm trying to think about what I have seen him in, because I mean, obviously I saw Wayne's World, but that's not what I think I know.
That's not a movie you know by heart like I do.
No. Yeah. He was in The Good Wife. That's probably where I've seen him most recently. He was in 2 episodes of Ally McBeal.
He's one of those. Ally McBeal, Boston Public, Felicity, The West Wing,
Alias, House.
Yeah, there's just some people who are judging Amy.
Yep. While we're still on cast really quick, this, I don't know if she has appeared yet. I don't think so, but a big character that stays for most of the series is Sister Andrea, who's played by Andrea Martin, who has an incredibly long TV and Broadway career. She's been in everything forever and is wonderful in this as a wise and sort of cocky is the wrong word. It's like sort of over it.
Fun.
None.
Fun.
Which I love a smart, like, you know, nun who has no respect for the idiot men around her.
Yeah. So that's good to know.
Yeah, she's great. She's really fun to watch. So yeah, I did not know much about the background of the creators. It's interesting that they are of Good Wife and Good Fight fame, because I did very much enjoy that show in a very similar way, which was like, I couldn't tell you anything specific anymore that happened in it. I just know I had a good time. And I liked watching it, and I liked the people in it.
Yeah, they have apparently only written together. That's like their whole thing, which I think is interesting. And I don't know. I never watched The Good Wife or The Good Fight, but they were making The Good Fight while writing Evil the first season, so that kind of overlapped.
Got it.
And they said in the interview, they only talked about Evil a little bit, but they're like, the thing that I thought was interesting is they were saying that one of the things they're really interested in with The Good Wife and The Good Fight was like social media and how that affects, you know, just different events in the world. And that's clearly just from this first episode also part of what they're interested in. They're like just the right age to be around for social media, but not be native social media users.
Oh, I don't know how old are they?
They're definitely older than us.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it feels like a little bit of a mystery to them, I think.
Right.
There are like some mentions in the second episode of like 4chan.
Yeah.
And some like camera stuff of being like, these pixels weren't manipulated.
Yes.
I checked the pixels. It's a lot of, this can't be faked. I'm like, I could have done that in Canva, but okay.
Yeah.
But so that's like a preoccupation of theirs.
Yeah, no, that continues too in a fun way, where it's like, you know, the thing about the procedural aspect is like you have to come up with some new mystery every week. And because they have this interest in internet culture, that does repeat in other episodes, which isn't really a spoiler. It's just something they come back to because they're interested in it.
I do like that they don't try to pretend any of it away. Like in the first episode, in this episode, David and Kristen are Googling each other and being open about that.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's fine and good.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was interesting that they were asked about is Robert is Catholic and Michelle is Jewish.
Oh, interesting.
And so to hear them like say overtly that their faith had some, you know, influence on this, obviously. They were both asked, you know, do you think, because the central question of the show, it's just like Wicked, you know, are people born evil or do they have evil thrust upon them? They both seem to think some people are just born evil. So
that is interesting.
And they just said that outright, that people are in fact, and I think he even said, well, like, as a Catholic, I believe in original sin and that we are all more likely to lean toward badness if we don't. I'm paraphrasing him here, but he basically said, like, we're way more likely to lean toward badness because we can get things faster and it makes things easier and you have to work against that. So I don't know how often that comes up in the show, but that is there.
I think it's interesting because I am not inclined to like a show that is like pushing religion in any way whatsoever. And weirdly, even at the times where it's like things are clearly attributable to whatever, like supernatural religious iconography and history, it's not, there's enough skepticism around everything still that it doesn't feel to me that it's like, oh, show that's pushing religion.
Yeah.
It's, even though there's some acceptance of the fact that they're literal demons. Like, that's like, they do leave room usually for it to kind of go either way, but I do get the feeling that like the people that created this, like you said, lean more towards some of this is real.
Right.
Which would normally put me off, but it kind of doesn't. I think because there's enough of I don't want to use the word camp when it's not necessarily applicable, but there's enough like
it is a little goofy.
Yeah, goofy is a better word for it. Yeah, there's enough of a goofiness to it that I don't seem to find it off-putting.
Yeah, it didn't feel, I mean, I'm only 2 episodes in, but it hasn't felt like preachy.
No,
really?
It really doesn't. It doesn't even throughout really to me. And it's interesting that one of them is Jewish and one of them is Catholic because I don't know if it's been mentioned yet, but in this Aasif Mandvi is from a Muslim family and has sort of lost his faith. And that becomes a thing as well, where it's like he is the man of science in this, where he's like always looking for like environmental toxicity or, you know, some like pixel messing with.
Right. Or in this first episode, it's the dishwasher's clogged, that kind of thing.
Yes, the dishwasher made the demon sound.
Yeah, in the original script, his name is Ben Schweiger, and he is described as a cross between Patton Oswalt and Penn Jillette. So,
okay.
It's cool to hear that his character is obviously influenced by the actor playing him, and they didn't just like change his name and move on with it, you know?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot because like to me, the point of it is not Catholicism and Judaism. It's religion,
faith,
and science.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Ben is from a Muslim family instead of a Jewish family, like it makes a difference because it's different representation, but in the general feeling of the show and its purpose, it actually doesn't make that much of a difference, right. Because it's just about the dichotomy between believing and not believing, not necessarily what you believe in.
Right. That's the other thing they said in the interview. I mean, a lot of this is obvious in the show, but I liked seeing like, oh yeah, this is where the seeds for it were built from. And we see this with this first case with Orson, that it's how do different viewpoints interpret the same data.
Yeah.
So is this person a psychopath or are they possessed? And, you know, can they both be right at the same time? If one is right, is one wrong? And they cited a book, Oliver Sacks, who he wrote The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
Yeah.
But he has a book called Hallucinations. And they were talking about people who are, for example, schizophrenic and have hallucinations. They show up on my TikTok a lot, these people who are like aware of their schizophrenia and aware of their hallucinations and are still like, you know, working and living their lives and just have this other thing to contend with and have like figured out ways of like looking through their phone, or they have animals who are trained to respond to people. So then if they don't respond to people, they know it's a hallucination and they can get on with their life. And it's like, if you don't know what that is, you know, how do you? So,
yeah. And I feel like, you know, I don't think this comes up in the show necessarily, not that I remember, but it does connect to this idea that like in different periods of history, people with mental illnesses or, you know, hallucinatory illnesses in general were often seen as seers or prophets or, you know, and they were more elevated instead of considered to be ill. And like, I'm not passing any judgment as to what that's not my area, but that it's just playing with that history is interesting. You know, thinking about it in the religious context, someone seeing things means something very different, especially if it's a religion that has a long history of looking at that as something other than mental illness.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because Catholicism is a fun place to set this because it is dramatic.
Dramatic, and it loves a spectacle and a miracle.
It really does. It really does.
So should we just run through the plot?
Let's talk about the plot of the pilot.
We open with this shot where I thought we were watching an ad for a second because it's you're moving through an empty house.
Oh, yes.
And it's a voiceover with Orson. So he's the first voice you hear, and he's saying, like, I always like houses better when they're empty, that kind of thing. Yep. And then you see him sitting, and you realize, or at least for me, I was like, all right, this is the show. But it's this really pristine.
Yeah, it looks like an ad for Apple or something.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
And so he's just talking about that. And then you realize that he's talking to our main character, Kristen. She's interviewing him. And she does this, it's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. That's the 567 true false statements.
Yeah.
And that's what she's using. She's a forensic psychologist. The next scene, we kind of get these three folded together. So we open on the house. We cut to this interview with
they're
Orson.
like an interrogation room, and he's like chained or handcuffed to the table.
Yeah, and she like goes through. He's done these really horrific murders that he claims that he doesn't remember. He's like. This dynamic, I immediately was like, oh, it's Clarice and Hannibal Lecter.
Classic evil and like young, pretty, you know, investigator.
And they have some weird chemistry.
Yeah.
And he's like interested in unsettling her, but finds her compelling. And that's why he's willing to talk to her throughout the rest of the episode, of course.
Yeah.
But you find out that she's a forensic psychologist who's been working as a like contract employee for the Queens DA, like Queens in New York, not Queens, not the Queen. I don't think I need to clarify that. It's set in New York.
Yeah.
So you find that out. She's been working for them for 2 years. Handsome stranger David comes in. We don't know his name yet.
Yeah.
But you see him watching. You find out that in this scene that somebody named Leland Townsend is claiming that Orson is actually possessed by a demon named Roy. So that sets up our argument. Is it
all
a
the
demon
demons
named
have dumb names?
Roy and George.
Roy and George. Yeah. All the demons have weird, like 60-year-old man names.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
So that sets up the entire thing. Is Orson a murderer? Because he says he blacks out and doesn't remember.
Right.
So is it he's lying?
Right.
He's blacked out and doesn't remember and it's some sort of psychosis? Or is he possessed by demons?
Right.
And then this is when we meet David and Ben more fully because she has to go back to interview Orson because of this new development with Leland Townsend. You get just a quick intro with David and Ben.
Yeah, she like runs into Ben in the hallway
while David is talking to Orson. Yeah,
but she had in the lore of the show, she was a Catholic and then had a loss of faith at some point in her younger life, and that's all we know right now. But so she at the end of that second interrogation of, I almost called him Roy, of Orson, she decides to kind of like, just for fun, maybe like test the theory and like draws a cross on the table and the dust on it and then starts reciting the Our Father and he loses it and like attacks her.
Yeah. And he's like saying some stuff in Latin. It's like,
if it's in Latin, it's supernatural. That's just the rule.
Exactly. And you kind of get the feeling of like, how would this guy even know Latin? Like that's supposed to be unsettling.
Right.
And so because of that, she withdraws her original like evaluation.
She wants to continue to evaluate and like take a minute to see what's actually happening.
Exactly. She doesn't say she thinks he's possessed. She says like we need to test for hallucinations, that kind of thing.
Right. She wants to take a minute and look into it further.
Right.
Which the DA is not down for.
Right. And in fact, when the DA, the like main guy in the DA kind of like pushes her and he's like, you need to be there on the stand to tell, then this is where you find out that she's like pretty spunky and like doesn't really take shit from people, which I like, because she goes up to him. She's like, if you want somebody to lie for you on the stand, you can get someone else. And she says it in front of the judge.
Yeah.
Which is pretty badass.
Yeah. She continues to not take shit from anyone, sometimes to like a ridiculous level, but it's kind of fun to watch. It's one of the things I like about her in the show.
Yeah, I do. I like that. She's got a personality. I know I already said Clarice. She's also Scully. It's maybe it's a little unfair of me to draw that comparison to any woman who like is bold and also doesn't believe in the craziness around her. Yeah. But it's hard not to. I mean, she's hard. Really there's an archetype there. She's really doing Clarice. Like in a lot of scenes in the pilot, at least, like you can really feel it. But I don't mind it.
But then we go home and we meet her.
Okay, we need to pause here. We meet her
4 daughters.
4 old daughters.
They're not old.
They're like she's supposed to be 34 per the script.
Yeah.
Her oldest child is like 12 or 13.
Yes, okay, that's true.
So she has an advanced degree. That's not a bachelor's degree. She has also had time to climb 5 of the 7 summits.
Yeah.
And for her husband to be...
She's a climber, and her husband is a climber in a very high level, like guiding people up Everest level climber.
It felt to me like I would not be shocked. They say nothing, and I'm going to close my eyes. Her children all have names that start with the letter L. Her name does not. I don't think her husband's name is Andy. His name also does not start with an L. Mm-hmm. There are 4 of them. They seem very old for somebody her age. They mention the cesarean scar, but we know no other information. Mm-hmm. The kids are calling her mom, but that doesn't mean anything really. I just would not be surprised if we find out these children are not her biological children, that she lost a sister or something, has somehow been given these children to care for. Okay. It just seems to me that there's something, or because it's a network TV show, they just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes that is also the case. It just seems like a lot of kids for a woman with an absentee husband who has a full-time career. And also, as we learn in the scene, owes somebody a ton of money, not just for her student loans. I'm going to open my eyes now.
Okay.
But we learn a lot in this little section.
I also think it's one of the things I like about the show is the very weird but specific sense of place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't feel like Queens to me, even though it's supposed to be Queens. But the fact that she lives in this house under the train tracks does feel like Queens. That part, hearing the train over your head that loud all the time, is very Queens. It's also very city, but that type of housing specifically feels Queens also.
Also, just having a house in the city. I know that like that feels more like with like a little bit of a backyard.
Yeah.
There's something, again, I already said this, and I don't, maybe it is just because it's network TV and they do whatever they want. Everything about this and not just because of the demons, feels a little removed from reality. Like her house is really fanciful. I mean, part of it is because the kids have the stars and like decorated, but it just doesn't feel, it feels a little unreal in a way I really like, that I think is really I can't totally explain it. A lot of it has to do with how it's shot and like the color palette. But
they're definitely trying to blur the line between what's happening in real life, quote unquote, and what is happening in the nighttime, in their dreams and things like that. Like, there's definitely a way, like you said, a way that it's shot and like a color palette that doesn't necessarily distinguish between everyday life and the supernatural.
Yeah.
It's kind of shot the same way. And that gives the sort of everyday life scenes a little sense of being slightly left of center.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we find out she has 4 daughters. It's one of their birthdays. We find out she's got a husband who's off in Nepal. And he's kind of a deadbeat. She's like defending him, but he's sending back
she's sort of the financial like breadwinner of the family, it seems like, which is why she's in all this debt, because he's off doing this work that is like was both of their dreams, but because she had kids, she kind of lets him continue that dream because it's, you know, their passion.
But does he just come home, get her pregnant, and leave? Like, because again, there are 4 of them.
Yeah,
and I noticed when she's talking to David about it in a little later, he asks why she gave up because she only, you know, like
5 of the
7. She says children. She doesn't say I had children. So that's one thing. She's also really big into canned margaritas.
That continues. That is a so wild, funny, specific detail. She loves those canned margaritas.
You could tell when they were working her character out, they wanted to give her a couple of quirky little traits, and that's one of them. I like it. I think it's funny. She's got like a little man cave that she hangs out in and drinks her canned margaritas.
Yeah. Her office that looks like a garage that like a teenager turned into a spare bedroom.
Exactly. Yeah.
And her 4 children, I don't want to just skip over the fact that she has 4 girls, because that could mean anything. She has 4 very loud, very rambunctious.
I like them.
I like them too, but there is a part of me, since I am now past childbearing age, that when I hear all 4 of them talking at once, which is something they always do, like they talk over each other constantly, it's like nails on a chalkboard a little bit. I'm just like, oh my God, stop. Like,
it's funny because you can tell that's the point of it, because they're always saying just random shit.
Yeah.
Like when she has the dream later and the kids come in and whatever and they're talking to her about it, one of them says, I'm 7 years old, what's the point? Which doesn't
don't none of it makes sense, when they're just trying to like one up each other and get attention, which I like that dynamic, in that it seems to not bother Kristen when they do that, but then she can shut it down and be like, okay, stop, you know.
And I like that she's a mom in a TV show dealing with kids who are clearly a lot, but it's not her whole thing. We don't even know. It's like a reveal that she's got the 4 kids.
Yeah.
We're kind of like surprised to learn that. She gets to go off and do her hunting whatever thing.
Yeah.
And it's fine because she has this cool hip mom who is doing, you can tell she's not like a doting grandma at all.
No.
But
she's around to watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she can work, and that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, David shows up because he got this address. He thought it was her office because it is, but it's also her house.
Yeah. And he shows up because he knows that she had that experience with, what's his face? Orson. And he explains that he works as an assessor for the Catholic Church to investigate supernatural events to see if exorcisms are needed. And he wants to hire Kristen because he has a backlog of cases. So he wants to hire her to find out if the possession of Orson LaRue is real or not.
Yeah, and she's like, I don't believe in any of this, and he says he's fine with it. He says like, the quote is, "Possession looks a lot like insanity, and insanity looks a lot like possession. I need someone to help me distinguish between the two."
Yeah, and I think actually prefers that she's skeptical because that will allow the decision to be more like even or words hard,
objective.
Yeah, will allow the decision to be more objective.
Yeah. And this is where we cut to credits, by the way, is right after this scene. So it's pretty far into it.
They do that. Yeah, it's weird. The credits are very late. I'm always like, what episode am I on?
Yeah.
But yeah, so she agrees to investigate with them. And they go to the home of LaRue because his wife is convinced it's possession.
Man, the names on the show, Leland Townsend and Orson LaRue, are such good bad guy names.
I know.
Yeah, she agrees to go check it out with him. They go to the house. They meet Orson's wife.
Right.
She's recorded this really creepy sounding whisper. That's the thing that kind of has her convinced.
Right.
He's a demon. We find out. This is important. We find out that he had just gotten back. He'd had a fall at work or something and had just gotten out of the hospital. Yeah,
they're trying to give lots of different possible explanations that you can kind of grab onto. But she has this recording that she took when she found him standing in front of the refrigerator in the middle of the night that they have to try to figure out. And so Ben, the tech expert is there to try to figure out how it could possibly happen that is in a way that is not demonic possession.
Right. Or I guess some sort of psychosis. Like he really wants, it seems like real world tangible explanations for things like this. Yeah. And he explains to Kristen that the way the theory for possession, because he also doesn't believe, is that first, a house is infested, which is basically a haunting. And then once it takes over the house, then it takes over someone in it.
Right. And that's the possession.
And then we have our real faith versus science conversation with David and Kristen.
Yeah, that conversation is like often used as a clip to kind of introduce the show or advertise the show because it's so on the nose. Dead on about what the whole thing is about.
I want to just say one little thing about that conversation. Like I said, it's very on the nose. If our listeners watch the episode, if our listeners didn't watch the episode, it's just the whole thesis of the show. Do you believe in miracles? Can a mystery be blah, 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 why doesn't science believe in miracles? That kind of thing. But Kristen suggests that the fall maybe led to violent behaviors. He says, "Oh, that's your theory," whatever. And then she says, "I don't know, but I'm checking into it," which is that's not a saying anybody says. You can look into it or you can check something out. And I can't believe that line made it all the way to air.
It did not register for me at all.
I'm checking into it. Nobody says I'm checking into it.
Okay.
That's all.
Got it.
I'm checking into it.
Yeah. So she's curious about David now. Obviously, he's extremely hot. And so she Googles him. She sees him as this world traveling, globe trotting guy before he decides to go into the priesthood. Talking, I think he's supposed to be in Afghanistan or something. Right,
because he hasn't mentioned to Kristen that he is studying to be a priest. He's 2 years into a 5-year program. Ben tells her that. Right. So now he says that I think he says something like he dropped out and went on a So he like wanted to see the world. That's all she knows until Ben tells her that, and then she starts this Google search.
And it's supposed to be very clear to us, and I think it is, that like she's attracted to him pretty much immediately. Missing husband, off gallivanting on Everest, and hot priest shows up, or hot almost priest.
Yeah.
So then she has her visitation dream, whatever. George. She has George.
He's so funny.
I was almost out when, like in episode 1, just because you know this about me, a goofy special effect demon guy in a suit thing is something I have a hard time with.
Yeah, if you weren't raised on Buffy, for me, this is like coming home.
Exactly.
I love
that's
goofy
why I
ass
said,
demon.
as soon as I watched this, I was like, this is an Andrea show.
Yeah.
And that is because I know that about you. And so for me, I was almost out.
Totally fair. Totally reasonable. But
because it is like, it's clearly like guy in a suit. So yeah, she has this visitation from this demon named George, and there's all of these back and forth moments. Like he goes and pees in the corner.
He says, because she's like, "You're just a night terror" or whatever, and he's like, "Could a night terror do this?"
Right.
He goes and pees in the corner.
Right. And so she eventually wakes up. Her daughters come running into her room, and she sees the floor is wet, and it's one of those, wait, was it real? And then you realize the window's open and it's raining, and they're just jumping back and forth to try to like keep every possibility alive.
Yeah. Another thing of TV show is she is married. She doesn't, theoretically, her room is not set up to sleep alone. The tiniest bed, just the smallest bed for her.
That's definitely
and 4 children.
Yeah. Not a queen.
So then she goes to her therapist, Dr. Kurt.
Oh yeah. We meet Dr. Kurt here.
I should say psychiatrist. I don't know about you, but the person who prescribes me medicine tends to not be as interested in my day-to-day as my therapist. But they've kind of collapsed those two.
Yeah.
Because he prescribes her diazepam, but she's like going through her dreams, and it's funny when I was watching it the first time and it ends up being necessary like for the plot, but I'm like, she's really telling this guy. I mean, I know he's her psychiatrist, but
what I got from that interaction and from their relationship is, when you are a therapist or a psychologist, you are required to have your own therapist and or psychologist. And so I feel like, to me, they have this like colleague / therapist client relationship. It's kind of a little bit of both. And so maybe there's more candor there.
Yeah.
Because they're also colleagues. Like she's seeing him.
You might talk a little differently.
Yeah. It seems like she's seeing him because, she just has to have someone to check in with as someone who's a practicing therapist, or
she tells him about George. That he took off her, I think she says either way, he like comments about her underwear and her cesarean scar, and she gives him like very specific details, which is useful later for the show.
Exactly. Is this where we get the visit back to the house and we find out that it's the dishwasher? Yeah. So we go back to Orson's house, and Ben does his, CSI explanation of how the clogged dishwasher hose ended up making the weird whispering sound.
Yeah. And my guess is that we're going to see a scene like that in many episodes, and every time I will find it satisfying, even if it's a little silly.
Yeah.
Again, it's the house of it, where you think there's a big medical mystery that nobody's ever solved before, and then you find out it's a tick bite or something.
Yep. Or a dishwasher hose.
Exactly. And then it's another interview with Orson and David this time.
They kind of up the ante here with what's actually happening.
Yeah. We get another we also get another test, so she's good at her job. She does this penmanship test. I kind of like that they just throw these in there. She's like, I want you to write out the alphabet, but stop at the 14th letter. And me, someone who doesn't know that much about psychology or religion, was a little confused about what we were testing for here.
Yeah.
But it's just to see, it's a penmanship test.
Okay. Yeah. There are a lot of those tests. I'm like, I don't know what they're testing, but I'm sure it's a thing.
Yeah.
But then somehow the thing that gets us to the questioning place with, is this real or not, is that LaRue knows about her visit from
They
George.
do a lot of interviews, because it's actually, there's another. This is why every show should be a half hour long, because it's actually just the penmanship test. Then David and Kristen, so they have that. Then David and Kristen have some like cute little banter. You find out they Googled each other. It's just building more chemistry, which I think they're great together. I really like watching them bat things back and forth. Kristen draws a sign that says, "Can you read this?" and tapes it to her ceiling.
Right.
And then George comes to her in a dream and is giving her a hard time for flirting with David.
Right. And she's done that sign thing because apparently you can't read in dreams or something. So if the sign isn't there when she looks up, then she knows she's dreaming.
Yeah, it's like a logic thing that is strange to me, because it's like the area of your brain that is responsible for interpreting text is apparently dormant during sleep. And I can't say for sure if I remember ever seeing writing in a dream, but I don't know that the part of your brain that thinks it can read when you're dreaming is do you know what I mean?
I also don't know if a dishwasher hose can make it sound like a demon.
Also true.
I'm just going to kind of go with it.
Let them go with it.
A lot of this show requires just being like, okay.
Yeah, which
cool.
Again, fine.
Okay.
I wasn't questioning House, so if he says so if she says so, fine. Then we go back to Orson,
the interrogation
with David. David can tell that it's Roy. Like, he's being a little weird, and David says, like, Roy, and that's when he knows about George.
And she's visibly rattled by this, because obviously how the hell would he know about this demon that's visiting her in her sleep,
right?
Unless he was also a demon.
And then we also get a seed planted here that I have to imagine you know more about. He says Roy, and then Roy says something, and so David like responds with, he's like 60 other than yourself. Like it seems like there's 60 demons. I don't know. That seems like but
maybe.
But then that's like a big thing. When I was watching this the first time, I was like, ooh, that's spooky. How does he know about her dreams?
Yeah. We find out very quickly, though.
It's like pretty much the next scene.
Yeah. It becomes this sort of it's solved very quickly. She finds out that he has stolen her psychiatrist's notes from their sessions. He's kind of pretended to be someone looking for a therapist, broke into his files. This is very elaborate. Stole the notes and fed them to Orson to pretend that he's possessed to get him off of the charges.
Yeah. And Kristen finds him in court testifying about Leroy and
just
confronts
the most smarmy, self-satisfied Michael Emerson performance.
I love Michael Emerson so much, and I'm so glad we have him, because it's like he's doing a little bit of like a jollier, a little more turned up version of oh my god, why can't I think of his name? Of John Doe in Seven. Where he's just like, Seven. Oh man. I'm so glad we have him, because Kevin Spacey has been canceled off the planet, rightly so, but we have Michael Emerson.
Yeah, that smarminess and that self-satisfied.
Yeah, and just able to say just the most just abhorrent things, but in a way that is like he has no problem just saying the worst stuff and is delighting in being horrific.
Oh yeah. And it's sort of like interestingly emphasized by his physical presence. Like he's a smaller man. He's kind of a nerdy, glasses wearing.
Yeah, they've got him in glasses.
Sweater vest. Like,
they're always shooting him in this weird, almost fisheye lens kind of way. So his eyes look even bigger and he looks even more.
Yeah, exactly.
He says something to her in this scene about, like, I forget the exact wording, but it's something about like leaving the experts to it. Like she's like, out of her depth. And she says like who or something, and he lists your boy Toy Acosta, LaRue, the 60. So there's more 60 people who know who you are. And then he offers to kill her kids for her. Yeah, because he's read her notes again, and has all of these things you would say to a psychiatrist that you wouldn't necessarily want people to hear,
I don't have children, but I can imagine if I did, I'm sure there were times when I would be like, God, I wish I didn't have this
exactly
to deal with, which is like a natural thing.
She tells him to go to hell and he says, with pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll make room for your kids.
Yeah. There's a lot of him sort of like using her kids as a way to get to her, in this episode, especially.
He does the same thing to David when he does show up.
Right.
He says, like, this is where we learn that there is someone in David's past named Julia. He says, don't you remember her crying on her knees? He calls her a weepy little bitch, which is oof.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's having fun with it. And he even says, like David punches him, and he kind of laughs and says, what was that? Whatever happened to nonviolence? So then David says it's provisional. And then he's like, oh, is that what Jesus said?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah. I when I was watching this the first time, I was like, I bet there's a lot of things I would understand more or find even funnier if I had like more of a background in Catholicism and religion, that I'm just like assuming I know things that I maybe don't, but
then they, Kristen and David kind of like decompress. She asks who Julia was. He just says a friend. Right. This is when he introduces her to the idea that there are people out there, whether or not you believe in demons or not, whether they're demons or psychopaths, there are people out there doing bad things for the sheer pleasure. Right. And this is where we get this idea of, the world is getting worse because evil is no longer isolated. Bad people are talking to each other. They're connected. And then she says, through social media? Like, yeah, girl, we get it. It's through social media. We know it's bad.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you mentioned that the creators are interested in the way that the internet has changed things. I mean, they're laying that out as their thesis in the beginning of the show, basically, that like it's made it easier for evil to develop and connect with other evil things, just because of the internet.
Yep. And so I'm sure they'll find more ways to play on that. And then, I mean, like, that's kind of everything. They interview LaRue's wife one more time to explain to her so they can explain to us what happened was Leland fed these notes that, and
it seems like in this episode that they are able to prove that Leland did take the notes. And it seems like the court case is going to work out in the way that we think it should, which is that, she like goes and then explains that to Orson and says like, I think she says you're 48, you could live to be 100 because healthcare in prison is good. I feel like I'll bet that's I wonder how true that is in real life, but yeah. But he calls her a bitch and she says, oh boy, do you have that right? Which is, again, she's tough. I like her. Yeah.
You find out that they were communicating through his wife's email account.
Right.
That he thought he wasn't gonna, as if there's so many reasons.
Yeah.
Why, of course, he would get found out that he was using his wife's email account to be on hilariously 4chan.
Yep.
But we find all that out.
Yeah, and we get the nice sort of like case of the week resolution, but also it leaves a ton of stuff open, like all the questions you brought up about the 60 and about like Leland and because we do see him. He and David are familiar with each other in a way that's a little surprising.
Yeah.
In this episode, you're like, wait, how did they know each other already? Right. Like, what's going on there? So there's enough questions where we're like, oh, like there's an ongoing story. And we've talked about this before, this idea of a show where there's like the episode of the week, but then also an overarching story and how that kind of precipitates what happened to me, which is just, I just leave it on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So...
yeah, and it does a really good job of that satisfying, tidy little ending.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking of when we were in our pilot season of like our little list of criteria, which I think we've worked our way through. But they're definite. It's like not just like the 60 is a big one.
Questions, right?
Is Leland a devil or a demon of some kind or just a psychopath?
Right.
Who's Julia? What's up with Kristen and her husband? I want to learn more about that. I want to learn more about the kids.
Yeah. Is George actually a demon or just like, some sort of night terror.
Right. There's they what's up with her mom, like everything in a way that I think is pretty impressive for a pilot. Like they set up a ton that I'm interested in.
Yeah, totally. But I think none of that works if the chemistry of the main three doesn't work. And in this case, it does. And I think that that's really, that was the selling point for me that got me past my like reservations about the type of show that it is or whatever.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I've gotten through 3 of 4 seasons and that chemistry just continues to be fun to watch.
Yeah. I wouldn't say, I read a review that called this pilot a masterpiece.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
I wouldn't call it a masterpiece. I think in terms of like, did you get done what you set out to do? I think it totally did. I think the show is so far hokey a little bit, but in a way that I'm charmed by. So I don't.
Yeah, that doesn't change.
It's not. It's. I don't think it's a show you watch because you think it's like, elevated.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like some people did think that, and I'm not sure what they're watching. But I don't need it to be that.
No.
So, yeah, we get the setup right at the end where they're like, she agrees to go on one more case with them.
This is
like,
fun.
Okay.
This one's different. It's a miracle. It's a medical miracle.
Right. And she's like, I could have a look.
Yeah.
So.
I could check into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're now set up for the 3 of them to be this like ragtag team of, people who don't really think about things the same way and have to parse through that.
Yeah.
So you're going to keep watching?
I'm going to keep watching. I told you I already watched the 2nd episode.
Yeah.
I felt, just to tie that up, I felt the same way about the 2nd episode as I did the first. Second's a little too sentimental. But otherwise, all of my same feelings about it apply. I love a fun little candy show.
Yeah. And I mean, just like any show like this, the episodes, some are stronger than others, some are wilder than others, some are, quieter. But there's enough of a consistency to it that it just kind of kept me going. Yeah. So I'll definitely watch season 4 now that I know it's accessible to me.
Yeah.
I had to resubscribe to Paramount Plus anyway, because Yellowjackets will be back in a month and a week.
Yep.
So I just did it about a month early so that I could watch the rest of this.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say if you didn't watch because you wanted to hear our take on the pilot before you did, I think, it's, if you're going to be re-upping your Paramount Plus pretty soon anyway.
Yeah. And you can always, if you have Netflix, I think, or Hulu or one of those, like you can watch the first couple seasons.
It's on Netflix for sure. And I think anywhere else you need the Paramount Plus tie-in, but it's all over, it's not hard to watch. And I think it's fun.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. A couple other things I just wanted to highlight that I watched over this extended couch rotting period of my life. So over my convalescence over the break, I figured I would knock some things off my list that I'd been curious about, but not enough to actually sit down and watch. So one of them was Say Nothing, the adaptation of Patrick Radden Keefe's historical nonfiction book about the Troubles in Ireland. Not something that I really have not that I'm not interested in history. I like history, but it wasn't like something I was necessarily drawn to. But again, our friends that don't know they're our friends on the watch, our 2 Philly counterparts, we're very, very, very high on this show. And I've been familiar with Patrick Radden Keefe's writing and his sort of long form investigative journalism before. And so I watched the whole thing in 2 sittings.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really well made. And it focuses, what I didn't realize is it focuses not on the whole thing, obviously, because how the hell could you do that? That's like decades and decades and decades of history of, British colonialism. But it focuses specifically on a pair of sisters, primarily, and their role in the IRA in Belfast. And the women playing those sisters, both the young version and the older version, are really good. And so I think I enjoyed it a lot. partly because it was a piece of history I don't know that much about.
Right.
And it was interesting to take a very specific slice of it from the perspective of two young women, which is not what I would expect.
I was just going to say, yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so it does talk about sort of the role of women in that time period. And it just, yeah, it was an interesting way in to something that seems like a huge topic that I would not really know how to even approach.
Right.
To take a little slice of it, specifically in the starting in like the 80s through the early, like the 2000s. And focusing on these two sisters and like one or two people in their immediate orbit in Belfast that were part of the IRA. And so it's based on a true story. And it just, I thought it was really well done. I didn't expect to go through it as quickly as I did, and want to continue. But yeah, and it's actual history. I mean, it's a lot of it was taken from this project created by Boston College, where it was this like series of taped interviews that were with people who had been in the IRA that they were guaranteed that they wouldn't be released until their deaths because it was still so dangerous to talk about, like what really happened. And so it's sort of told, that's sort of the conceit that we go into it with, is like one of the sisters is in her older years talking to this interviewer. And that could be kind of hacky the way that they used it to frame it, but it's not. Like it feels like it's sort of a seamless way of thinking about the lives of these women from when they were, I think, like 17 to 19 when all this began for them to their later years. So
fascinating.
Yeah, I really liked it. If people if it sounds interesting as an idea to anyone, I would say try it out and take a couple episodes.
Yeah,
see how you feel.
I might check that out. How many episodes was it?
It's one season because it's based on a book. And it's, I think, 10 episodes.
Okay.
And it's interesting. There's like a definite moment where it shifts. Like the first 5 episodes, somebody, I have to give credit. I think it was The Watch that said like the first 5 episodes are the fuck around time. And then the last, it's either 9 or 10 are the find out period.
Okay, great.
Yeah. But it does this weird thing where it's not romanticizing the Troubles at all or the IRA. It's being very like blunt about how horrible and violent it was. There's tiny bits of historical footage in there, but it's not heavy-handed. But at the same time, you do understand this draw of like extremist is the wrong word, but like purity of politics when you're young.
Right.
How everything seems black and white.
Black and white.
It's really interesting to think about the perspective of like a 19-year-old and then what happens when you look back in your like 50s or whatever and have a more nuanced view of what the greater forces were. So
yeah,
I liked it.
I think I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah. The other thing that I watched that I have weird feelings about, I don't know if you've seen it, is Baby Reindeer. I know you're familiar with the story. But...
yeah, I haven't watched it.
Okay.
I worry it'll make me too anxious.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about Baby Reindeer because it's hard to say things about it without not spoiling. I mean, it's theoretically based on a true story, but apparently he's not allowed to say that anymore because there's enough discrepancies with his depiction of the woman in it and the quote unquote true story it's based on. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. I did watch the whole thing. It made me feel like he's probably not a very good comedian. I think that was kind of the point.
Right.
In a way that like he ended up being more of a TV writer than a comedian. But it also just kind of highlighted the toxicity of that whole world of like, I want to say like the basement of the entertainment world where everyone is like trying to do something and not everyone's going to be able to. The other thing that there is warnings in front of the specific episodes, but if you aren't aware that there's some really, really heavy sexual assault themes in this, you should be going in, because I was not. And there are warnings in front of the episodes,
but they're like not as much as
I just wasn't expecting. And maybe that's my fault for not doing any research other than knowing the general outline of the story. But I don't think I realized how specifically graphic the representation was going to be.
Okay.
And so just be warned, if you do decide to watch, that sort of in the middle of it, it gets into some sexual assault territory that is just really frankly dealt with in a way that I don't know how I felt about it.
That's good to know, though. For sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I have a few other things I'm watching right now, but nothing that I want to like necessarily highlight. So
nothing you're ready to put a stamp on in either direction.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't watched much of anything, but I've just, my two little updates are, I read a book that I got at the airport when I was flying to Boston this week that I read in the time it took me to get there.
Okay.
It's called Hampton Heights, One Harrowing Night in the Most Haunted Neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh.
And it's set in 1987. It is about a group of kids. They're all newspaper delivery boys. The like deadbeat guy who like manages them, picks them up one night and drops them off in this weird little neighborhood to go door to door selling newspaper subscriptions. And the neighborhood they get dropped off in is like just the most haunted kind of weird little neighborhood. And so every door they knock on is a different little adventure. It felt like the Goonies. It's really quick. It was really fun if you're looking for something to just spend a few hours with, especially if you love things like the Goonies or a lot of the monsters in it and like creatures. There's like a troll in it. Feel like I could see what the Henson Studio would do with it.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like this guy was trying to make a movie and then couldn't sell it, and now it's a book, which feels like an insult, but I just loved it. I thought it was really sweet, really fun. By Dan Coys.
Oh, he's a Slate guy.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I should have said that. Yeah.
I met him.
He
was at the residency with me in Georgia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we spent like 2 weeks together at a residency.
Fun. Oh, well, he wrote this book and it's very fun. He's written a few things, but that's the one that I've
he's
read.
Super nice.
That's good to know.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Well, I loved Hampton Heights. I thought it was really fun.
Oh, that's nice to know. That makes me more likely to read it because I like him as well.
Yeah, it was candy.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Great. Pick up in an airport.
I love it.
Land read. Had a great time. And then last year, I think one of my best ofs was Mythic Quest.
Yes.
Which I think it was one that I had watched a year late. But season 4 is coming back January 29th.
Oh, nice.
And then also a spin-off called Side Quest that I'm excited about, which is just a little 4-episode anthology series. I love Mythic Quest, follows some creators in the gaming industry, but it's not super really about, I mean, it is about that, but like, I'm not a huge gamer and I really love it.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that you mentioned last year that I thought I was going to at least try out and then just completely forgot about. But it sounded, I like the people in it.
Yeah, it's fun and silly, but then also oddly sweet in a way that I had not anticipated. And it's, again, Rob McElhenney's show. And it's got lots of people who have come up on other things we've watched, like David Hornsby and Danny Pudi. And
wasn't Aparna and Charla in it?
Aparna and Charla's another one. Anthony Hopkins does a voice. Like, it's got a huge, interesting cast. I like it so much. I'm really looking forward to season 4 coming back.
Good. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So that's in a couple of weeks.
And Severance is back in 2 weeks.
So excited for Severance.
I know, me too.
I kind of forgot how much I liked that first season.
Yeah, it's back in 2 weeks, so maybe we'll check in on it after the first episode airs or something.
See how we feel. Yeah.
I'm excited.
I'm very excited. Yeah. I love that weird little show. I know we've both, while we're kind of like recapping stuff, I know we've both been watching Silo and have conflicted feelings about that. I think maybe I'm going to withhold my total judgment of the show until I get to the end of the season.
Same.
And maybe we'll weigh in later.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that once we've seen how they put a button on this season, it'll it'll be easier to kind of clarify my thoughts on how it went
in
retrospect. So instead, one of the other shows that's been recommended to us a bunch in relationship to Yellowjackets is the series From, which I actually already watched the first season of and got quite frustrated with towards the end. I did enjoy it when it started, and I've been since convinced that I need to give it another shot because the second and third seasons got a lot of really good feedback. So I think what we are going to do is watch the pilot of From for next week and discuss it.
I got to tell you, I know so little about this show, but I have a feeling just based on hearing other people talk about it, that the things that you have struggled with are reasonable things that a reasonable person would struggle with, but that this show is...
I know what you're going to say.
It's like crazy enough that I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
For the reasons that you don't.
I totally agree. I mean, like, I think that Evil was fell into a weird place in my brain where normally I would have had more resistance to it than I did. And I'm wondering if maybe revisiting From and knowing that there's going to be a point towards the end of season 1 where I'm like, I don't know what you're doing here, guys.
Right.
That if I get past that and get into season 2, that I might change my mind. So I'm not going to give you any spoilers. I'm going to give you one sentence from the premise.
Okay.
The series is set in a nightmarish town in the United States that traps those who enter.
Perfect.
Period.
Yep.
That's it.
I wonder if maybe Evil doesn't feel like it's taking itself seriously, and you don't have to tell me one way or the other about From, but I get the impression that From sort of is, and that I could see being frustrated by that.
Yeah. I think it might have just been that I like to, if you're not going to give me answers to anything by the end of season 1, I'm going to get frustrated. Give me a little bit.
Right.
Give me
That's
a little
totally
bit.
Fair.
Right. Like some answers. I don't expect everything to be tied in a bow knowing that you're going to have more seasons, but like, give me something that I can hold on to. And I think that if I remember correctly, again, I watched this like at least a year ago. But if I remember correctly, that might have been part of my issue. So I'm going to revisit the pilot. You're going to watch it for the first time. We're going to talk about it, and maybe I'll change my mind and maybe I'll go back. Not like I'm not going to have anything to watch, because soon we've got our reason for existing, or at least our reason for our origination.
So soon.
I know. A month and a week. So
and that we're going to have Severance pretty soon to hold us over.
Yeah, that's exciting too. Yeah, good stuff is coming back. I mean, like, I know that you weren't a Last of Us lover, and I'm kind of... It was another one of those where I was like, I don't know why I like this, but I'm just going to keep watching it. That's coming back in the next couple months. A bunch of stuff that I don't love as much as I love Yellowjackets, or some of the other shows that I am obsessed with, but I like enough to be excited to see the next season of, are coming back in the next couple of months.
Cool. And we can check in here and there and see how those shows are going. Yeah. But yeah, in the meantime, where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram at WatchersPodNJ, and they can find us via email if they want to send us their recommendations or their feelings about the shows we're talking about. I'd be curious to know if any of our listeners watched Evil, because it was so under my radar. I had not even heard of it until I saw that like year-end list. They can email us at watcherspodnj@gmail.com. And they can find me on Instagram at Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM.
And I'm at AQ Andrea Q.
Sweet.
Where will they see us?
I don't know. They call it the township. We'll see you in the township.
Beautiful. Goodbye.
Bye.